Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Well, good morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida. Today, we're discussing the cost of doing business, lighting residences, safety releases, online continuing education opportunities, and when to walk away. All on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. The originals are back. Stan, Steve, and me. We're back. Yes, here we go.
It's the SSD.
It's the SSD.
Stan, Steve, and
Well,
David.
that sounds like a venereal disease. SSD.
Probably is.
Anyway, it's a social
I
disease.
don't have it, though.
We're a special SSD, special social disease, the Lumen Brothers.
Here's my question. Did you miss me?
Yeah, of course. We always miss you.
Okay, that's all I want
We
to know.
always miss you. You know, I mean, come on.
I miss you guys, too.
We miss the chemistry, as they say. The
chemistry.
weird
Did you miss
chemistry we've got. It's
Yeah,
a
but
very
I think I
weird chemistry.
pontificate about science too much.
Yeah, we
don't.
have a letter
You
about
don't.
that, by the way.
I heard. I got a sneak preview of that.
What were you saying, Steve? It's something.
Oh, nothing.
He's-
Nothing.
Steve's saying, I'm just letting these two guys talk and make fools out of themselves. Well, welcome everyone to episode 228. And, and personally, I'm glad to be back. I missed last week's show because I had a little small health scare last week. And today I'm on a heavy dose of pain meds, so I'm not taking any responsibility for anything I say today.
Here he goes with the disclaimers
The
again.
disclaimer's already begun. I mean, if anyone heard that, what was it, artistic finance thing I did? Boy, but the first
was
10
good.
minutes. Yeah, it was fun. But,
It was good.
if you want to know what not to do, listen to that episode. Okay, anyway, so let's get started today with Letters to Light Talk Central.
Ooh, another one.
That's right. So today we got a letter from Granger Bighorn from Magnolia, Mississippi. And Granger writes, Bozos, y'all make me very confused. For 4.5 years, I have been an avid listener of Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers, and I've enjoyed your show and your obtuse humor. However, a few months ago, strange people started to invade your studio. First, Stan is gone, and we have some weirdo named Zach taking his place. Then Zach leaves, and we have this lady called Ellen, who is evidently an industry bigwig, cause she is so much smarter than you three. And then we have this doofus guy named Driscoll. What type of name is that? Sounds like a cleaning fluid or something we put in a meth recipe. Now, I like the variety, but I need some warning when you guys are not going to be together. You see, I need to medically prepare for your show, if you know what I mean. And I use different medications for different hosts. For the three of you, I use this special strain I get from my dispensary that's called Blue Hawaii. I know Stan went to school in Hawaii, and this strain completely blocks out endless pontification about science and stuff that I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. It keeps me from getting a headache. For Zach, I use psychedelic sassafras. Zach is a cool progger, and I like his taste in music. This medication makes me mellow for the cool bass and guitar riffs he lays down on the Light Talk theme song. Reminds me of yacht rock. For Ellen, I use the strain called That's Right, Bubba. Ellen is the only Light Talk host who knows what the hell she's talking about. I know you guys are in it for the entertainment, but I know that Ellen won't lead me astray. For Driscoll, I use geeky grass. Not saying that Driscoll is a geek. Well, on second thought, he probably is. I just find him much too knowledgeable for a 16-year-old. And finally, for Anna Brackley, I use good old-fashioned spiced schwag. This always does the trick for these straight shooters. So please, Luminoids, make sure I know who is going to be on your show in advance so that I am properly medicated before I listen to it. Otherwise, I may have a bad trip when Stan starts pontificating about science, and I am cruising along on Spiced Schwag. Good luck with the rest of Season 5, and I'll see you at LDI. Granger. P.S. For your LDI swag, I vote for the Night in Vegas kit. Please tell me if you're going to offer this kit in advance so I know what to bring to Vegas. Well, Granger, I hope that you found enough Blue Hawaii to make it through this show. Anyway, we hear your concerns, and we are going to start being a little more accurate on our next week guests at the end of the show. So make sure you listen to the entire show to the very end, and we will tell you which hosts will be on the next week's show. But thanks a lot for your comments. So let's follow that with news. That's right. Today we have a little bit of news. A few days ago, the Olympic closing ceremonies happened. And that is kind of big news because we normally talk about the opening and closing ceremonies on this show. We talked about the opening ceremonies, 2 weeks ago? And we weren't that impressed with them, if I remember correctly. And we saw them, a few nights ago on NBC. And first of all, I just want to say that the Olympics basically turned out to be a total disaster for NBC. They had the lowest ratings in 33 years.
That's because I didn't watch.
Oh, is that I like the Olympics. I love
David, if they just enforced the same rules for everybody, their ratings would go up. I mean, I want to know why the beach volleyball men do not wear bikinis.
I agree. I totally agree.
If they just, and the gymnast, the male gymnast, put them in a singlet out there.
That's right. See how they move.
It has to be the same for everybody.
Right. I totally agree with you, man. I mean, I think it should go through all sports. People need to be wearing the same thing, like a unitard of some sort. Otherwise,
sounds like socialism to me.
It was not good, and there are obviously a lot of reasons for it. The pandemic really threw a loop, and they're actually competing in front of empty stadiums and empty venues. It was really sad. And you know something? When we talked about it 2 weeks ago, we had high points and low points of the opening ceremony, and Steve got it right on the head because he said the low point was not there yet because it was going to be probably on the closing ceremonies because most of the athletes had to leave after 24 hours or 48 hours after their last competition. And that's what happened. So there were comparatively few athletes on that field for the closing ceremony. So it only looked half full.
And that's why the lighting was so terrible.
It was, oh my.
I did some research into this, and I thought that this is, the thing that struck me was the vast amount of shadows that were everywhere.
Oh my God. You couldn't see people.
And then I went back, Beijing looked pretty good. I mean, they really handled the floor quite well. Right. And actually Brazil looked pretty good, but I was noticing that there were shadows, particularly at Brazil also, until the field was full of people. And then the shadows are obscured by the bodies walking around. Mm-hmm. So when you don't have anybody out there, there's going to be some shadows that are seen. And so, that was, without people, I don't know if that lighting designer had a fighting chance to light that as an arena and not have shadows all over the place.
Wow. Well, I'm going to just quote Zach. Were there any designers? I can't imagine there being. I haven't seen anything that poorly lit in a very long time.
We're going to have a hate mail next week.
I'm sure, and I'm sorry, but I don't know what happened. But toward the end, they had this sort of big finale where they had this pop band and the pretty upbeat music, and someone basically turned on the chase function on the MA or whatever they're using and randomly picked a speed frequency to have it totally off the beat. And not only just off the beat, it wasn't even the same frequency of the beat. So it was just annoying and looked like a really bad nightclub.
It reminded me of those early daytime kind of extravaganzas you saw at the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 1 through 10.
Yeah, those were the Up With People years.
And then they figured out how to do great productions after that.
Yeah.
So I don't know with the design team, how their hands were tied, what they had to do. Who knows what they were fighting. Maybe we were lucky to get what we got.
That's right. And I think that's a very important point that you make, Steve. It's hard to judge because we don't know what happened in the background. For all we know, everyone was fired 5 days before the ceremonies. We don't know, and it could have been something as horrible as that. But just from what we saw, it was really, really, unfortunate.
Well, they also could have done change-ups too. It's like we're not going to do the blue Hawaii number anymore that we've been staging for 3 months. We're going to change it to something else, and you've got 3 hours to get it done.
Right. But, just the basics, though, just flood the stadium floor with light so we can see everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see shadows like that at a football game.
And then the one big hit they had in the opening ceremonies, which was the drones, they didn't use drones. Instead, they did this XR thing.
Well, no one saw that except the television audience.
Pretty much, but, there was nobody there, so why would they see it? Why would they need to see it if nobody's there to see it?
It was rough. I'm still campaigning for the best Olympics of all time is between Greece and Beijing. Ooh. I think both of those people had incredible opening ceremonies.
Beijing absolutely was great. But now, apparently, there aren't a lot of countries who are even waiting in line who want the Olympics.
And we're only 6 months away from the next Olympics.
Well, and that's where? That's back in Beijing, is that?
The Winter Olympics is in Beijing.
Okay. Well, that'll probably be pretty good if there's anybody there, because they're having their own COVID problems too. So, who knows? I just think it's a really bad time. And I wonder, I hate to say this because I love the Olympics and I love the athletes and the competitions. I just wonder if the Olympics now are just sort of, I don't know, they're just not attractive anymore to people. Could that be? I guess we'll find out this winter. Oh, there's one thing I wanted to say, because there is a highlight. There was an amazing highlight to the closing ceremonies. And that was when Haley Washington, she's from the U.S. women's volleyball team, she just breaks down in tears. And she just falls on the ground and starts crying. And one of her teammates come over and they had a close-up of this. It was so beautiful. They were like touching their gold medals together. And it was just such an amazing human moment. To me, that was worth watching the 3-hour show. Anyway, so Steve has our first listener question of the day.
Yes, it comes from the Bluegrass State. Donnie up in Kentucky writes, how much does it cost to run a 1,000-watt fresnel for a show? I'm trying to make my point with the TD about switching to LED fixtures. Well, let's take a little walk here down memory lane. There's two types, right? Conventional and LED. So when we're talking about conventional lighting, we're usually referring to incandescent or halogen lamps or high discharge lamps. And those are now kind of old-fashioned compared to the new LED lights. However, conventional lights like your 1,000-watt fresnel remains popular primarily due to the strong light output and the low cost of purchasing the thing. Its brightness and affordability, though, come at a cost to the end user. Conventional lighting, you're right, conventional lighting does consume far more energy than an LED does, so there is some cost associated with that. But I think you can't let that be the one factor you're basing this off of. Conventional fixtures are going to produce a lot of heat, and the hot equipment can be difficult to handle and manage. How many times you burned your hands on it. And finally, that 1,000-watt fresnel is probably going to have a significantly shorter lamp life. Conventional fixtures have to be replaced and repurchased quite often. The fixture itself is damaged from the amount of heat that is produced inside the light. When you look at an LED fixture, okay, you're steering kind of clear of all those drawbacks of conventional lights. An LED fixture, for example, if you dread maintenance and you're frustrated by burned out lamps, well, an LED is for you. If you want to avoid the high cost of dimmers, if you're expanding a system in an existing theater, then LED is for you. LED offers color options. LEDs have proven safer to operate. And LEDs are catching up in output. And face it, LEDs are more energy efficient. But as far as how much does it cost to run a 1,000-watt fresnel for a show? Okay, here's what you do. You're going to take that 1,000-watt fresnel. We're going to make this easy. Multiply 1,000 times 24.
Why 24?
24 hours in a day.
Oh, got it. Okay.
That's going to give you 24 kilowatt hours. And then just look at what you're paying for kilowatt usage. Here in Dallas, the price ranges from about 6 cents to about 10 cents. So we'll go with the 6 cents figure. So if I take 1,000 times 24, it's 24 kilowatt hours times 6 cents. That means that 1,000 watt fresnel is costing me $1.44 to run for 24 hours. So, it's the cost. I think in the early days, this was a nice way for salesmen to go up to city council meetings and independent school districts and kind of say, oh, you're going to save millions of dollars. I don't think that's the reason you buy an LED fixture anymore. And I don't even know if that was the reason you should have bought it to start with. It's come so much further than what a conventional can do. Face it, you are probably going, if you buy a brand new fixture, you're going to go to a reputable company like Martin or Elation or ETC or Strand. You're going to buy that fixture and it's probably going to outlive you. You'll probably be retiring before you replace that thing. So, that's the reason you buy an LED fixture. So I think when you're talking to your TD, the things you're talking about are not kilowatt hours. That's just kind of background noise. I think you're talking about maintenance. You're talking about you're not going to get a call at 7 o'clock, come rush to the theater because a lamp is burned out and no one can climb the ladder but you. I think that's why you're looking at LEDs.
Getting back to your example, the 1,000 watt Fresnel, that is if you're running that 1,000 watt Fresnel at full for 24 hours.
Right.
In a show condition, that 1,000 watt Fresnel may run for, I don't know, out of a 2-hour show, it may be on for 20 minutes at like 70% or 50%. And again, that changes the whole calculation.
Yeah, so Donnie can get his calculator out and do his own math.
Right, exactly.
See what your LED fixture, how much power it's consuming, and just multiply it out that way and plug in your 6, 8, 10 cents a kilowatt hour number.
I would only add one thing to all of those excellent points. And going back to what Steve said about heat, that the incandescent lamp is 90% heat and 10% light for the energy consumed. But the largest consumer of energy in a building, right on top of electric lighting, is heating and cooling. So if you want to do some math, the heat load on your theater from an incandescent rig versus the heat load on your theater from LEDs. And some could argue that the driver for the LED fixture puts out some heat, but it's tiny compared to the heat load generated by an incandescent rig. So if you're going to do some number crunching, do the number crunching on the BTUs and the heat load generated by the comparison of the two fixtures. Well, I have the next question from Sunny in Utah. And Sunny says, I've been asked to do some residential interior lighting design. Do you guys have some tips for me? Well, actually, I do. I don't know about you guys, but some people might think that interior lighting is kind of simple. You just got to light up my room. David, I'm sure, will have something to say about this because I know he's gotten more sophisticated.
Well, I just bought some Hue stuff that's more sophisticated.
Yeah, I remember David saying once, I have the worst lighting in my house you've ever seen. I'm like, you're a lighting designer. How could that be?
It's pathetic.
But what I want to say is if someone has asked you to do a lighting design, if Sunny is a lighting designer, and someone has asked you to do residential work in their home, that means they are at a certain place in life where they really have a discerning taste and they want really good lighting in their house. The average person probably would not be looking for a lighting designer to light their home. So let's just start with that. So you've got a client who's somewhat sophisticated. So on my little checklist or tips for you is get to know your client, which goes for anything, of course. The second point on my tip list would be you need to know the products. And we think there's a lot of products in entertainment lighting, but trust me, that could fill a thimble compared to what's out there for home lighting. There's so much product that you need to know. So get to know the products that are out there. And you'll understand them. It's a little bit different, but you really got to get out there and get your head into that. I would also say, understand what a hierarchy of brightness means in an environment, meaning setting the different brightness levels for different parts of a room or a space. Get a good knowledge of light levels. Understand of lux levels. Do you know what 10 lux looks like? What does 100 lux look like? Get a sense of what those numbers mean. And adjust your sense of scale. A home is a much smaller place than a theater. It could be a big home, but still size of fixtures, the amount of distance you spend from something. So you really have to scale down in a way and change sort of the way in which you think about light and what you really need. And then lastly, I would say, study the work of the late John Flynn, who did a lot of research on how lighting affects emotions, right? And he talks about some very, very specific things in terms of the built environment and how light affects the way people feel. And those would be my top tips.
Well, about 25 years ago, I used to work with a really good friend of mine named John Bowes, who had this really, really great lighting consultation firm in Houston, Texas. And he did mostly architectural, but residences, he did large buildings, he did stadiums. He's done some amazing projects. And he was kind enough to ask me to join him for about a year to do some projects. And we did a lot of high-end residences. And like Stan said, know your equipment. And know the tools that you have. And it's really kind of interesting to learn all those tools, by the way, because there are a lot of companies, a lot more architectural lighting companies than there are theatrical lighting companies for obvious reasons. But we were once doing Hakeem Olajuwon's house. It was a mansion that he was building. And I believe the story is, if I remember correctly, because it was like 25 years ago, is that, where the Houston Rockets played for the pre-show, they had a bunch of Cyberlights in the rafters of the arena that would project gobos down on the basketball court and stuff like that. And Hakeem said, "Oh, I want 4 of them for my foyer." And we were trying to convince him, no, these like the 1,200 watt arc fixtures. No, I want them in my foyer. And we said, okay.
Did he get him?
Yes, he got him. Of course he got him. He was paying us a lot of money.
Did you put him on toggle switches on the wall?
I don't remember how we controlled them. I think we had some sort of, I think High End at the time made this like small controller.
Built-in effect that just ran,
like some sort of, no, we designed the effect and they had a small controller at the time that could run these things, I guess for nightclubs. Okay. But yeah, and he got him and he had like 4,800 watts running at the same time.
So when you ring the doorbell, these things turn on and do a ballyhoo?
I don't remember, but it was something crazy like that. Some people, they just have so much money, they're just going to say, okay, yeah, sure, I don't care how much it costs.
That seems like that's the case there.
I do remember there was a lot of discussion between us and the electrician and the contractor about how to support them in the coves, because they were like up in the coves. So just the mirror was sticking out, if I remember correctly. It was just nuts. It was a crazy thing. But yeah, I think, Stan, you made some really, really great comments there. I totally agree with them. So Katie in Pennsylvania asks, does your school require students to sign any kind of release form to work on stage? If not, why? Who is held responsible if they are injured? Well, Katie, I think that's a really good question, and I will answer it as depends. It depends on how the students are hired. Some schools actually expect their students to work in the shops and labs and in theaters, obviously, as part of their assistantship, right? And depending on how they are hired as assistants will tell you exactly what would happen if indeed an accident occurs. But first of all, as far as a work release, I personally have not worked in an institution, and I've worked in 3 of them, that required work releases because our students are already covered through medical, and they weren't employees. And again, this is the key, is whether or not they are actually employees of the university. Because if they are, then they'll be covered under workman's compensation if something happens to them. But if not, I would guess that it just depends on the institution and what their medical coverage is. How about you guys? Steve, how do you guys handle this sort of thing?
Well, I think there's 2 things here for Katie. So I could believe that Katie is a teacher. So if you're a teacher and you're worried about this, you shouldn't be asking us. You should be going to your HR department and asking them to take a leadership role in this and explain to you how things work. If you are a parent, then you can ask us. If you're a parent, then go to the department chair and say, I have concerns about this. Little Billy here is working in the scene shop as a part of his class. He has taking Stagecraft 1, and he's in the scene shop, and there are a lot of dangerous power tools in there. What kind of supervision is he getting, and who is responsible if he's injured? So go right to the source, and what you're going to find is the HR department or the department chair. These are questions they answer every day of the week. You're not the first person to ask this. I'm in the same boat David is in. I've taught at 2 universities, and neither school has set up a work release for classes taking place in the scene shop, as an extension of the classroom. And I wonder if that's different over in the chemistry department, if they treat that space differently than we treat it. So I don't have a good answer for you, but I can tell you I'm going to ask our department chair next week and get some guidance on this.
And Katie, one thing before Stan answers, because otherwise I'll forget if I don't butt in now. When you do ask the chair of the department, make sure you do it in writing and you get an answer back in writing. Because if that person calls you, you have no proof what they told you one thing or another, and then at the end it's like, oh, I never said that.
So I think this is a really interesting question. I think listening to your answers is really great. I think that Steve's going to come back with some more data. I don't know answers to everything, but I'll just speculate around a little bit. So we do have insurance for our graduate students. So the graduate students, when working in shops or on stage, are medically insured and they are employed. So workman's compensation would kick in for them. The student, now like Steve alluded to the chemistry department, which I think is a really good analogy. When the students who are there as full-time students are working in the laboratories, which are the theaters, it would be akin to working in a lab and you drop the test tube or you cut your hand on something or whatever, or you're working in the ceramics studio and you touch the kiln when it's too hot, right? So there are these sort of inherent dangers in any sort of work environment. We do take a lot of precautions. Everybody's got to wear a hard hat in our spaces. They do sign, I think the performers do sign some documents about use of their image, and if they may be asked to cut their hair or alter their appearance. There are some things that I know that we pay for, like if a student needs to get a rehairdo or have their hair dyed, but that's not necessarily a danger issue. But I think our production management has quite a bit of bureaucracy around this. Now, who is held responsible if they're injured? Boy, now you're getting into a legal world, and I think ultimately, there's always, in America, you always have the right to grieve, right? So you can always file against someone, and people should be careful about being negligent, and people should be reasonable about respecting safety protocols. Probably what would happen at a large university like ours is the immediate supervisor would be held responsible. So let's say it was in the light shop, it would be my electrician. Now, he's going to be a member of a union, and the union's going to have $1 million in liability coverage for him. Then it goes up the chain of command. Then it would go to the chair of the department, who has culpability for operating a safe space. And then it would go up the chain of command to dean and university level, and ultimately to the board of trustees in terms of, if you were thinking in a legal perspective, if something happened, who was held responsible. I don't think anybody could say. What I would say to you, Katie, you should not sign an indemnification statement. In other words, if an institution were to ask you to indemnify them, meaning that you would be giving up any rights to redress should an unsafe work environment were to happen, don't sign it, because then you would have no recourse. And I think when you see something that's unsafe, or you feel you're being I ask students, are you afraid of heights? I ask students who are going to work in our shops, and I don't do it anymore because I'm home because of COVID, but do you have any health issues that we should be aware of? For example, you're hypoglycemic. Okay, if a hypoglycemic person gets dizzy, I know I got to get them sugar fast. I can go to the Coke machine. So there are some things about danger that we can mitigate, but a theater is a dangerous place. It's an industrial environment. And so people need to be careful, and the culture has to be set. I hope that's helpful. It's somewhat speculative. I don't have. That's what I have to offer at the moment.
Stan, those are great points. Even though you may be covered by workman's comp, does not mean you cannot sue. Like Stan
Correct.
says, it still gives you the right to litigate if indeed it is a dangerous workspace, especially if you've warned them. Like, why are you painting the stage without having any signs that say wet paint? Because a professor like David Jacques will come in here and slip and fall and screw up his neck, which is what happened to me once, believe it or not, on that school.
No.
So
unless you sign something waiving your rights, and that's happening more and more these days. I can tell stories about that in my personal life. So both with medical professionals and with and places where you go for vacation, ask you to give up your constitutional right. Don't do it.
Mistake.
Read the stuff they give you in fine print. Don't just sign it.
Mm-hmm. If you can read it, because the fine print sometimes is so small you can't read that.
You got to get a magnifying glass. You are listening to Light Talk, and today's episode is sponsored by
Pip, pip, tally, bally, ho. From across the mighty Pacific, here comes the cheeky rigger Asia. Well, the world is returning to normal, and it's time to get back to work. It's been a long 15 months, but here we go. Load-ins, load-outs, uprigging, packing and unpacking the truck, lifting motors, lifting speakers, pushing boxes, laying dance floor, and walking up all those steps to the follow spot position. It gives me a backache just thinking about it. That's right. 15 long months of Netflix, Zoom meetings, and Billy's Pizzeria have taken a toll on your body. Face it, my friend, you have gotten soft and weak. Still don't get the picture? Remember that scene from the Avengers when the Hulk smashed Loki? That's right, the puny god scene. The first day back, you are going to be one lump of sore muscles lying in bed wondering what just happened. But what to do, kittens? It's too late to go to the gym. That train has left the station. Look at the calendar. The state fair season is just 3 weeks away. The BA is putting together crew calls for the Labor Day music festivals, and Garth Brooks is on tour again. Well, the cheeky rigger Asia offers you Professor Henry's Muscle Cream and Relaxer. Or as we call it, Preparation H. Preparation H. The only cream that provides rapid relief from the pain and burning of inflamed muscles. Perhaps your muscles have stretched and are bulgy. You can gently apply Preparation H and just push them back into place. I know what you're thinking.
Oh my God.
I use Vaseline. Well, that's a mistake, my friend. When you are really in pain, you need Preparation H. I just used a little before this show. I'm sitting here quite comfortably now. Preparation H, because your sore muscles are not going to fix themselves. The cheeky rigger Asia. We make underwear too.
Steve, the great thing about it is that this really has a lot to do with cheeky.
Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom. Get that hi-hat hit.
Well, okay.
A little dab will do you.
That's what they say.
And now, back from Asia to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those rabbit ducks means that it's once again time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about when do you walk away from a show or a client? So today we are going to discuss what are the limits before you say no more or no mas. We all know that show business is ripe with shysters who take advantage of the goodwill of theater artists. But this is not just restricted to just theater. There are crooks everywhere, even in architecture. So guys, what do you think?
I think a man's got to know his limits. Women too.
When to say stop.
It's sort of like, sometimes we've talked about this before a little bit, but you want to get a job. somebody asks you to come and, look at the project, or read the play, or come look at the house, or whatever it is, and you go and you spend some time and you spend some money and you kind of think you're going to get it. And then they ask you, what do you think of this? And then, can you do a little sketch because I need something next week? And you do a little, and you just slowly start to give, right? And because you're working on spec, right, that you're going to get it. But you may or you may not. And then at a certain point, you go, I need to send an agreement, or I need to get something in writing, because at what point do I just keep working on faith, right? So at a certain point, like I had this recently, where I got to a certain point, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm looking at the clock, and I've got 6 hours in on this job, and a trip that was like an 8-hour drive, and I'm not under an agreement yet. So at what point do you do give, like architects all the time, there might be 5 firms competing for a project. They look at the stuff, they do a certain amount of work, they go in, they have an interview, they make a presentation. They're going to have hours of work, and they may not get the project. And then if they don't get it, okay, you write that off as a cost of doing business, and it's probably deductible, right? But for us, when you're a small-time operator, you got to have to, like I say, using the Dirty Harry line, you got to know your limitations. Right. So how far do you go? So I'm more interested not in, well, there is the thing about firing your clients. When you get to a point where this is not tenable, how do you get out of the job or realize you made a mistake getting into it? But I'm also thinking about how much do you do up front before you get hired, right?
And do you know what that is?
I think it's a moving target.
Yeah, because it's different for every client.
I think you got to have an internal switch for yourself, right? And you judge each situation independently.
Why don't you just charge an hourly fee?
Yeah.
Up until a point, maybe. Up until a point that you come into an agreement? So you're talking about Steve?
Just say, okay, the first 4 hours are on me, and then after that we go to an hourly contract until we sign a project agreement.
That's fair.
I do that with interior design.
Yeah, that could work.
Well, Steve just answered our question.
For me, I learned this back when I was in college. I couldn't believe it. A friend of mine was an interior designer, and at the time, this is a long time ago. At the time, he charged $150 an hour, and that was his consulting fee. And
that's pretty good back then. Wow.
Yeah, so now. So for me now, I'm at the $300 an hour range for the first 4 hours. If I'm doing something with the architect for a salon, or we're working on a boutique grocery store right now, the first 4 hours, I'm guaranteed $1,200 no matter what. And I thought about that, and what the architect told me, and it was kind of his idea, not mine. He said, at some point, no one wants you if you're free. Free is not a bargain. You can't just stick them, but you have to make them understand that your time is valuable, and you're giving them something. So I know it's hard because in the theater we've kind of trained people that we work for free, and I'm not sure why we did that ever.
Well, there's also good faith, and I think it's still. Steve, I love this. Yes, you start building. You say, hey, listen. I just want to know when I start working with you now, it's going to be $300 an hour. And then we can come to an agreement when you're ready to hire me. But this is just the way I do business. However, in the theater, it depends on who you're working with and what part of that project you're on. And also, what the possibilities are. If it's a new play, maybe a show that may be going to Broadway, or if it's a one-off, you don't know the producer, or you do know the producer, you do know the general director. That all changes. For instance, there are a handful of general directors or artistic directors who I would work for free at first, if they needed just advice, knowing that 99% of the time I'll be on that project eventually. But if you don't know, then I think it's really wise to think about what Steve is talking about, and certainly find a way that you will be compensated so that you're not working on the damn project for a year and then you find out that they're using someone else after you've done all that work.
Well, let me say something about Steve's point, and I'll be upfront. I'm not quite as expensive as Steve. I'm at $275, but I'm in a different.
Steve is larger than you are. So
Yeah, that's
he's-
true.
so he needs a little
He's a
more
bigger
money.
family,
Yes,
and
exactly.
he's in a different market. He's in Dallas, and I'm in Gainesville. So it's just different. But what I want to say is though, yeah, and I could say that to the client, like, okay, once we start, well, that actually they'll, this happened recently. What's your hourly? And I tell them what it is, and they nod, okay, and then we kind of start to work. But do you have something in writing, Steve, that you're going to get that $300 an hour for as you start, or do you do that on faith?
I do that through the architect. He has something in writing.
What if it's directly with an owner?
You just send an invoice, wouldn't you?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
David's got a point, and certainly, I've worked the same way. But I've learned now if someone says, could you be involved in this?
Right.
And particularly in the contemporary Christian world, people call me up and say, can you come to the theater? Brother Bob moved to Colorado and no one knows how to run the Grand MA. Can you come? Can you just come by and help us out? Yeah, I can help you out. $300 an hour.
Yeah.
But so I think if it's a reasonable fee, and I mean the first meeting, I don't charge someone just to show up and talk to them.
Right.
But if we're going to continue this conversation past that initial meeting, then I think they're obligated to pay for my time. If I went to the dentist, I wouldn't expect to sit there in the dental chair, while the dentist checked my teeth out and then go, well, I don't know if I really want to work with you moving forward. So I think it's owning a small business. You just can't be greedy about it, and you can't be foolish about it.
It's very tricky because, again, a lot of this is the type of relationship you have with the artistic team, the director, and the other designers. I think that would also make a very important, like for instance, if my I work with like 3 directors now, and that's it, right? And if any one of them came to me and said, we're doing this show in Italy in 3 years, and the contracts aren't out yet, but it's going to happen. Let's start working on it. I'll start working on it. I'll start working on it. And if the show's canceled, the show's canceled. I'm not worried about it, to tell you the truth. It rarely happens, but it does happen. Happened during COVID, right? But for you to tell the director, or if I was going to tell the director, yeah, I'll start working on it, but it's going to cost, $100 an hour, for all my prep work. That director's going to say, I don't think so. Really, because they're not getting paid. And I think it's just different when you're doing theater shows. And again, just depending on what the team is like and who the director is. Because directors are your lifeblood in the theater. They're the ones who are going to be hiring you. So you don't want to make it too difficult on them. And I'm constantly battling that, believe it or not.
Well, you're talking about trust and a relationship.
Yes.
I work with a writer and a director. I've done 2 shows for them off Broadway. We were scheduled to open a show on Broadway and COVID hit. And that project has probably died. Who knows? But I mean, I'm not counting on it. But if they called me up and said, the same thing, we think we can put this together and we've got an opportunity to grab a theater in 3 years, I wouldn't charge them a rate until I'd signed a contract on the show.
And that's a really good way of dealing with it. You never know when shows die or not. I've had shows revive 4 or 5 years later after we thought they were surely dead. It's like the show in Helsinki we thought was surely dead, and it's not. It's happening now.
Happens in architecture too.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially in architecture.
I think there's a tipping point. Otherwise, you walk away from all kinds of projects.
Right.
If you say, well, I've had 6 meetings with the person, haven't signed a contract, I'm going to walk away from it. I think at some point you have to give them an opportunity to make it right. I mean, you're allowing someone to take advantage of you. And then you get upset because they are taking advantage of you. So at some point you have to speak up and say, these are the rules. If you're going to hire me, these are the rules of the game. And they have to be rules that are reasonable within your industry. A lot of shows got shut down in Dallas. And most of the theaters, and there's no villains here. Most of the theaters said, that's just it, tough. The season's shutting down. And I know that it's November and your show was supposed to go up in February. We're not going to pay you. We're not going to pay you for a show that the theater were closed. And I knew a couple other theaters that had deeper pockets who actually said, we're doing this show in March, and the theaters have closed in November, but we're going to honor the design fee that we said they were going to pay.
Or give you a percentage of it. That actually happened quite a bit. They gave percentages of the fees. So
exactly.
That happened to me in one case. So Steve has our last question.
It comes from Jessica in Atlanta, Georgia. And Jessica says, I just got my BFA in theater and I'm looking for continuing education courses online. Any suggestions? So there's a couple of different ways to approach that. So I know you don't mean this, but continuing education, I don't think you want a mail order MFA program. So I think let's take that off the table to start with. I think maybe the first step is come to LTI in November. But I think if you call Verilight up, or if you call up ETC or High End or ACT, I know Martin does. And there is the Entertainment Technician Certification Program. You can call USITT up. And all of these people are involved in education. And it's more than just, tune into YouTube. So and I think, again, most reputable companies are going to do this. But I guess, I think my first stop would be the Entertainment Technician Certification Program and USITT, because I think those two groups are going to have kind of the pulse of the industry and what is worth your time, because some people might even charge you money. So you want to be careful what you're spending your money or your time on, for that matter.
Right. And if you're looking into more the design area, you should certainly look at Clifton and Mark's program that they're doing now. What is it called again? Studio Design or Design Studio?
So David, what you're referring to is the Studio School of Design.
That's it, the Studio School of Design. New studio is in there. I just didn't have the right thing.
Yeah, I'm looking at their website right now, and they've got like a couple bullet points here about what the Studio School of Design is. To fulfill a community need for lifelong learning, to design a holistic curriculum that manages art and technology and philosophy, to work toward an end goal of a diversified community of theater professionals, to maintain an affordable learning environment once you're out of school. So there you go. To prepare contemporary designers for the broad range of today's demands, and to create an inclusive and multicultural learning environment. I mean, this sounds like it's, just what you're looking for.
Yeah, unless she's looking for something that's more technical and less artistic in design. I think it'd be a great thing to do anyway. And I believe that the episode in which we interview Mark and Clifton is episode 215. So check it out for more information.
I do have something in the architectural lighting world for folks who might be interested in that. There's a software called Dialux, Dialux. They're based in Europe, and they have an extensive online learning repository. And there's some of it's free, but the really good stuff is you have to pay. And whether or not you get a credential at the end, but it's really practical training. So Dialux Pro and the Dialux Learning. The cool thing about it is Dialux is free software, but it was funded by many of the architectural lighting manufacturers. And what they got out of it was their fixtures are embedded in the library, and then they use that money that the manufacturers gave them to develop the training. So that's something to look at.
Thanks, Stan. That's great. That's really great. And listen, you're not going to get everything for free. So, we're going to look for training that people have to pay their bills. So there's nothing wrong with that. So listen, guys, I think we covered it all today. We went through the Olympics. We went through the job training. What a chock full of information that we gave our listeners today.
See what happens when I show up?
Thank you, Stan. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, livedesignonline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk shenanigans.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you decide to litigate, the law firm of Flocked, Flair and Blair, and their little paralegal snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are completely, totally depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to join us next week when Steve Driscoll and I will talk about more crazy things about our crazy industry. You got that, Granger? Geeky Grass for next week.
All that and the new sponsor.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.